Oh,
Okay, so welcome everyone. My name's Carol Brayford. I'm the regional coordinator for Climate Lobby in this
no, they're
region.
just doing like welcome.
And Peyton, nobody's muted at the moment, so hush. I want to hear from some of you, so I'm going to leave it everybody unmuted. But you can mute yourself if you want to. You're welcome to. So this morning, I'm hearing some feedback. Let's see. There, got it. So we're going to do a few things this morning before we start our first plenary. I'm very excited about the first plenary. Great to see so many people. All right, so first, let's just look at who's here. So there are 39 people here so far. Do you know how to raise your hand? It's the bottom bar under reactions. So raise your hand if you were from Arkansas. Reactions, click on, I know Jan is here. Few people, look, there we go. Okay, they're coming. Okay, now you can lower your hands and raise your electronic hand. Okay, Arkansas. Raise your electronic hand if you're from Kansas. So lower your electronic hands if you're from Arkansas. Larry.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, you just go back to the same place and it says lower. Go to reactions. You can either raise or lower. So Kansas, okay. All right, wonderful, glad to see you. If you're from Oklahoma, raise your electronic hand. All right, Kathy, yay. And if you're from Missouri, please raise your electronic hand.
I'll see raise hand.
Okay, right down at the bottom under react. Okay, wonderful, you can lower your electronic hand. So there's so many people here I want to thank. Our team that's created this. If you unmute yourself and just say hello so people will see you. I'm going to name Paula first, Paula Leppert. I'll be introducing her later.
Hi.
Here's Paula. Sarah Saucedo. Unmute yourself, Sarah, and say hi. Did you say something so people will see where you are? Can you say something? There she is. You see her? Okay. And then so state coordinators all help to create this thing. So if you're on yet, unmute yourself and say hello. Let's start with Oklahoma.
Sure.
Start with Oklahoma.
Hi there.
Kathy
This is
Rand.
Kathy Rand
Wonderful.
from Oklahoma.
Let's see, is Tony here yet from Kansas? He's coming. I don't see him yet.
Kathy Rand.
Okay. And then Missouri's state coordinators, George Lauer, I see you.
Hello,
Say something,
George.
Yep, there's George. And Sharon Bagatelle, are you on yet?
I'm right here.
All right. Okay, there she is. Yay. And then Arkansas, Jan Shaper. Saw you.
Hi,
Unmute yourself and
everyone.
say hi. There you are.
Glad to see you.
Oh, she's out in her sunroom.
Finally, it's finally sunny.
Yes. And then Jean Larson, are you on yet?
Yes, I am. Hello, everybody.
Okay, there she is. She's outside
Yes.
too. It's warm in Arkansas. Yay.
No, it's not, but it's sunny.
Warm enough.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. Okay. So it's just so wonderful to see all of you. Today is a very special day. Lots of fun things. And I have a surprise for those of you who haven't been talking to me the last couple of days. Recently, my husband, Tom, you want to say hello? My husband, Tom, and I are both part of the U.S. Green Building Council chapter in St. Louis. And we recently heard a young man speak there. And I immediately said, I wanted him to come to our regional conference. And we finally connected just a couple days ago. So this is Carter Freeman. So Fortman, sorry, said your name wrong. Carter Fortman. He is a senior at St. Louis University High School, not the college, the high school. And when he spoke at the U.S. Green Building Council, he was just so elegant and authentic and just wonderful that I want to give him a chance now to speak. So Carter, if you unmute yourself and say something.
Yep, certainly.
Okay, wonderful. And what I recommend that you do is everybody go to the top right of your screen if you're on a computer and click on view and click speaker view, and then you'll be able to see him too. Okay, Carter, 2 minutes. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I spoke at the U.S. Green Building Council, um, and really what I focused on and kind of what I want to talk about now is my background as more of a conservative, as a Republican, and the main reason why I am Republican falls in line with the main reason why I like to advocate for issues like climate change, and it is because I am a staunch supporter of the Declaration of Independence and the ideals that it promises, and then that are hopefully fulfilled in documents like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights within the Constitution. Um, and really, those three principles are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And one that I like to focus on a lot, although I think advocating for climate change also advocates for life, it also advocates for the pursuit of happiness. But liberty is the big one that I want to focus on right now. I go to a Catholic school. I'm a senior at St. Louis U High. And so in my theology class, we talked about these different views of freedom. And in the Christian tradition, we have this free will. We're given this free will. And there's this difference between freedom from, which is a traditional American sense of freedom. It's the freedom from the federal government, the freedom from Great Britain. Then there's a freedom to. And the freedom to is the most important one. It's the freedom to do good, to live in accordance in the Christian tradition with God's will. And I believe the same is true with the Declaration of Independence. We're given the freedom to live in a clean, healthy world. And this idea of free trade, of the free market, which Republicans often are so staunchly supportive of, we don't really have a free market right now. We have these huge government regulated monopolies like Ameren in St. Louis that control the energy sector, that control where we get our energy from. We don't have a choice. We don't have this choice to choose whether we get green energy or not. And because of that, I want to advocate for that choice. And the government, even though I'm weary of a federal government power, I believe the government has the responsibility to provide that competition. And I just want to thank everybody here today for coming to advocate for climate change, especially since I'm a 17-year-old. I'm probably one of the youngest people at this conference. So just to come here and fight for what's probably going to be my future, and then I know for the future of my children, for your guys' grandchildren, for my grandchildren, for the descendants beyond. So just thank you guys very much.
Perfect. Well timed. Yay. Thank you so much. That's really great. I'm glad to hear you. So, so now I'm going to turn it over to our first plenary session, which is called Listening to All Voices. And I want to introduce the person who has put this together and is going to moderate it. And that's Sarah Saucedo. So actually, Sarah, let's do that again. I'm going to mute everyone and then we unmute ourselves. Okay, Sarah, you're unmuted. Okay, so Sarah is what we call our regional fellow. She's a master's student at Arkansas State University, where she's studying to get her degree in political science with a focus on public policy and economics. And she has put together a policy for today, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Carol. So just to start off, we'll do some quick Zoom housekeeping. So keep yourselves muted throughout the session. If you have any immediate questions, possibly about the verbiage we may use throughout this panel, just go ahead and drop the question in the chat, and Jan, our lovely IT monitor, will probably be able to answer that right away. And we'll be doing a Q&A at the very end of the session. And so place your questions in there and we'll be able to go through those at the end, okay? And so, as Carol said, my name is Sarah Saucedo, and I'm currently the Tornadoes Regional Fellow. And so before we get started, I would also like to just give a quick land acknowledgement and recognize that I'm calling into this meeting on traditional Wazazay land, and it's also commonly known as the Osage. And so I really recommend that after today, y'all go and look up what land that you're currently on and just give tribute to the people that originally are from there. And so just moving on, to start off, each of our panelists were invited here today because they're all very unique in their own way. and each has a different background and story in the environmental movement. And so we're just here today to listen to our panelists discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion in the environmental movement of the Southern region. I ask that you join me today to not only learn how to renew our efforts to recruit diversity, but also to pause, stop talking, let's put our egos aside, and truly listen to all voices. Learn from people unlike ourselves, learn how to improve our efforts, and follow their lead in proactive outreach to diverse communities in order to gain new perspectives that will help our chapters grow and thrive. So to kick this off, I'm going to go through and ask each of our wonderful panelists if they can introduce themselves. So y'all can all unmute yourselves, panelists, now, and we'll start with Katie.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm really excited to talk with you all today. My name is Katie Zakreski. I was a college graduate in May of 2020, a fairly uncertain time to graduate. I'm a young conservative, a young Catholic. I'm also a lesbian, so one of these things is not like the other. I work really hard on recruiting conservatives into the effort of climate change solutions, especially from a fiscal point of view and from the individual point of view. I'm really glad that Carter talked about that because we, as a conservative Catholic, I get to balance that, care for God's creation aspect, but also that it should be up to the individual to be equipped with the needs and the means necessary to do their part to benefit the environment. So I'm really excited to get to share my point of view with you all today.
Thank you, Katie. And we'll move on to Jacob.
Hi there, my name is Jacob Miller. I'm a sixth generation means Super Bowl advertisement that happened in Lebanon, Kansas. You'll know that's not an easy place to be right now. I've been a conservative outreach fellow. I've interned for Senator Jerry Moran on the Hill. But I was also one of the first in my colleges to start the Bernie Sanders fan club and the Young Democrats. So I occupy a position in the middle with no ideology, more ties to my values and morals than any sort of platform, and climate change is certainly foremost among them. I'm currently a PhD student in Kansas State University studying environmental sociology, agriculture on a NRT NSF grant. So I'm happy to be here and talk about my positionality and how it extends to the region.
Thank you. All right, Allison.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Allison Fabrizio. I am originally from New Jersey, but I'm currently in Missouri pursuing my bachelor's degree. I am studying environmental analysis and dance at Washington University in St. Louis, and I'm a freshman this year. So Katie, I understand with the graduation, we got that. I've been involved with CCL for now almost a year, and I also am working with the Sierra Club as their New Jersey's chapter high school liaison. So I work a lot with the youth, and as you can probably tell, I am multiracial, so yeah.
Thank you. And Joey.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joey Shelton. I'm from Oklahoma City, born and raised, lived here all my life. I'm part Maidu. It's a tribe from California. I've been involved with CCL for just a couple months, so I'm pretty new. I went to OU, studied political science, sociology, and history. And I'm currently working in the wind industry, just trying to find some way to help green energy in this whole situation. And this is another way that I can help too, joining CCL and trying to do whatever I can to help out. So, yep, that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to go through some questions and we're going to hear from our panelists. They're all going to take turns answering certain things. So as I said before, if you have any questions that come up, just go ahead and drop those in the chat, okay? So first, Katie and Allison, how important is diversity, equity, and inclusion to you? And what does it bring to CCL?
I'll go ahead and start us off. I think that I've always been the believer that when you get as many voices as possible that have a seat at the table and are allowed to speak, you're more likely to formulate a more thorough solution, a solution that doesn't leave out any community, a solution that's well-rounded and that is overall likely to succeed. So I think that, especially in CCL, CCL does a great job of this, of looking past red and blue, looking past Catholic, Protestant, atheist. It does a very good job of looking past those demographic factors and pinpointing the issues that we all care about, our unique perspectives, whether it's regional, whether it's farming concerns, whether it's military concerns. But in order to have a well-rounded solution, of course, you need to be open to recruiting anybody from anywhere. So I think that as I have worked on solutions with my group of people, our solutions have always been stronger whenever we're lobbying or something like that, when we have a whole array of people in the room, young and old, straight and gay, Republican, liberal. Whenever we have a wide array of folks, a diverse group of people, not just in our lobbying teams, but in our solution groups, we have a stronger argument because we have a stronger team and a stronger solution.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said there. I believe it's crucial, especially when talking about the climate crisis. People of color or people that are seen as minorities are disproportionately affected by climate crisis. And for those people to be informed about not what only is affecting them, but how to reap the benefits of new policies, they also need that spot at the table or in this discussion. In terms of CCL, in order to gain trust or endorsements that we want from either communities that are predominantly with people of color or businesses that are owned by people of color or organizations, we need them in the ongoing discussion and not just when we want them or when we need their support, you know? And even when talking about lobbying, knowing how to make our volunteers of color, of different sexualities, of gender expressions, how to make them feel most comfortable, and making sure that diversity isn't just a count of how many people of a certain demographic is included, but making sure that their voices are actually heard and valued is a truly crucial part that I believe will allow CCL to grow.
Thank you. Okay, so what are some ways you combat ableism in the organization?
Yeah, personally, I've only experienced CCL online. I am pretty new to this, so I don't have all the information about when we're actually in person. But from this, I can see that making basic adjustments can be really helpful in combating ableism in this organization. From Zoom meetings and webinars, making sure that transcripts are available and subtitles would be very helpful for people, you know, especially if subtitles come in different languages, to make sure that all people from all communities of all languages have access to that knowledge. It's a great step towards inclusion. Now that CCL is expanding on social media, making sure that descriptions of photos are available for those who need it. And overall, being careful of language we use and promoting a healthy and sustainable habit for people either struggling with mental health or just going through a hard time, because we all are right now. Just making sure that we all are caring for each other and we are all sensitive to the times that we are living in.
Very well said, yes. Okay. Is there any group of people you feel is underrepresented in the environmental movement? And do you believe you are represented in this environmental justice movement? We can start with Katie.
I feel like, and this might just be because of regionally where we're at, whenever I recruit, it seems as though I get a plethora of young Caucasian people who are always really willing to get involved because they have access to the technology, because they have access to internet, things that the South has really struggled to evenly disperse, especially through the pandemic, whether it's having adequate resources, internet access, things like that. So I always have a plethora of young, middle class to affluent, white people who are always thoroughly involved, eager to get involved. I've noticed that it's a lot harder to reach out to communities of color, just because I think that, as we've mentioned, there's still a lot of catching up that needs to be done in terms of spreading that technology out. And I think that they have so many other issues facing them at the moment that they might not see climate as incredibly pressing, especially in times of a pandemic. That makes sense. especially when you're, and that's something that we've seen whenever we've lobbied. A lot of folks in office that we've lobbied with are like, okay, the climate needs to take a back seat. I'm like, but it's always going to be here. So I think that in terms of populations, I think that I can tell you more about the ones that I often work with as opposed to the ones that I don't, which is something that now that I'm saying it out loud, I'll need to work on moving forward.
Thank you. Let's see, does anybody else have anything to comment, Jacob?
Sure. So I will answer this question the way a politician does. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about and then get back to the answer at the end. This is going to be a longer answer, but it's important. So stick with me. My answer in short is the middle. And what do I mean by that? Well, we talk a lot about conservatives, Republicans, liberals, and Democrats. And of course, we know those aren't synonymous, but I think when we talk about political divides, we have not come to an understanding of the aggregate representation, not just the demographic, but in terms of morals and values within the party. I'll give you an example of what I mean. So the Republican Party is what it is. It can change. You may have conservative philosophies or ideologies, but those may not always match the party. Case in point, let me read to you the 1956 Republican platform. Now keep in mind, this is when General Dwight D. Eisenhower was in office. He happens to be the 34th president of the United States from the 34th state admitted to the Union in Kansas, which currently has the 34th population. He also happens to be my first cousin 3 times removed. So I grew up hearing more about him as a kid than as a commander. So back to the platform. Provide federal assistance to low-income communities. This is the Republican platform. Protect Social Security, provide asylum for refugees, extend minimum wage, strengthen labor laws so workers can easily join a union, improve unemployment benefit systems. Today, I don't think any of these would be included in the Republican platform. So it shows you just how much the party can change. With this, there comes this polarization in the media where we tend to emphasize extremes of both the left and the right, and these tend to be what our public discourse is about. When in reality, there are several of us in the middle, back to reference to Springsteen's commercial, especially here in Kansas, where there's a lot of what we call common sense conservatives. The number one most frequent call, and I listened to thousands of calls when I was an intern in Moran's office, because that's what you do, you pick up the phone and listen to citizens, is where the hell has my party gone? This is not the party I knew as a conservative. How do we get back to it? And you see this a lot. Back to Danny Richter's point in his talk he just gave in the opening session, there is an identity crisis in the party, and that's primarily because there's too much emphasis on identity and not moral foundations and values. The last thing I'll say here is what do I mean by that? A moral foundation is essentially the thing that is most central to who you are. And there are 5 common ones according to sociopsychologist Jonathan Haidt. Liberals across cultures, across space and time, across spectrums tend to always emphasize care and harm. Care as much for the earth or the environment as you can, do as little harm to it as you want to. This tends to be the approach that most climate change people have. Here in CCL, what's nice is that we don't do that, but still there's this underrepresentation of values of risk assessment. That's why I think the Conservative Caucus is so important, because there's several business people in there where we can talk about risk assessment. So we're getting to a more central moral foundation. So I end with this. We all know and we all hear that we need to put the conserve back in conservative. We need to go a step farther and not just protect land, right? We need to understand where this fossil fuel is coming from, the earth, and price it as the pollution it is. And to me, that puts the conserve back in conservative along with the moral foundations of a party back to Ike's age. So that's the middle is underrepresented in these ways.
Jacob, that is an excellent answer. I found myself jotting down a lot of notes whenever you were talking, so that was excellent. I'm not going to even attempt to follow up on that. I'm really not. I think that was everything that we needed to hear. Somebody did ask me, though, about gender identity. I just got a direct message on whether or not I feel like more women are involved and more men are involved. Honestly, I think it's fairly split. From what I've noticed, a lot of men are always eager to get involved. It seems like a lot of females, at least in my state, are eager to take leadership positions. I'm the conservative state coordinator. Our 2 state coordinators are both women. Sarah Cicito is, I'm assuming, female. Thank you. So it seems like in our regions, at least, we have a lot more female identifying individuals eager to take leadership roles, but it's fairly matched on who's going to get involved in terms of gender identity. But to expand on that point, I don't see a lot of intersex or trans individuals. And again, this might just be regional because we're in the South and there's still a fear mechanism behind a lot of these, I guess, non-binary gender conforming ideals. But to answer that direct message, it seems like that there are still a lot of women and female identifying individuals, and not to assume anybody's gender, who want to get involved and take leadership roles.
Thank you for answering that, Katie. Okay, so this kind of flows into the next question, actually. What are some of the biggest challenges you face as a Black, Indigenous person of color, or conservative, or LGBTQIA+ community member working for the environmental change? I know that was a loaded question, a lot of terms in there, so I'll just repeat that, okay? So what are some of the biggest challenges you face working for the environmental movement as a Black, Indigenous person of color, conservative, or LGBTQIA+ community member?
Well, for me, as somebody who is both conservative and who identifies as queer, I'm able to pull from both of those communities, but they don't necessarily overlap. So as the conservative state coordinator, I'll recruit conservatives who aren't queer, but I'll also recruit people who identify as queer, but usually are never conservative. So it's good to have a pull on 2 very different groups like that, but there's never any overlap, it seems like. Especially when, you know, my job as a conservative state coordinator is to get more conservatives in. And it just so happens that a lot of the community that I hang out with tends to be more queer than they are conservative. I think, a much better job at recruiting one than the other. But it's definitely hard to balance in terms like that. You can definitely strike up a conversation, but I have to kind of turn on 2 different parts of my brain depending on which group I'm talking to, because there isn't a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I completely understand that sort of code switching mentality that you have to do between 2 groups. Since I am Black and white, there is like, I can't just go into a white room and be like, hey guys, I'm one of you. That's not really gonna go well, right? Also, I can't do that also with like Latinas or Asian or Black communities. I can't really do that. So there isn't a personal spot that's designated for multicultural people. So personally, being in a room where I'm the only one who identifies as either a person of color, a multiracial person, part of the LGBT community, it's a really big challenge. Not seeing people speak who share my culture or my identity is also hard, but that just means that we have more work to do overall. And yeah, especially being a younger person, I'm only 18. A lot of times my voice is not as valid because, you know, I don't have a degree. So, but just because I don't have a degree doesn't mean I'm not able to like, speak about certain issues, obviously. So yeah, it's a big challenge, but that's why intersectionality within the environmental movement is so important.
Yeah, it's very well put. I would also say I'm multiracial, so I completely understand where you're coming from, and the code switching, it's tiring, especially because I come from the West Coast, so even Southern and West Coast switching the way I do things it's a struggle sometimes. But okay, so moving on. How does CCL recruiting efforts support a diverse culture? And what are some ways you think chapters can better strategize to not only invite, but ensure inclusivity of diversity?
Yeah, it looks like CCL is already doing a pretty good job of this. It seems like they're making it a priority already. I mean, I could go to the website and list all the ways that they're doing that. But I think that there's always something more that can be done, of course. At the same time, we're talking about outreach. So everything kind of changes now. My experience with it, though, is, you know, I'm Native American and white, and I worked as a librarian. It's kind of an aside, in a largely Black community. And I was a part of a team that did outreach for the community and just tried to let people know about us, about what we're doing. And I mean, and for us, it was, if there was ever an event in that community, we were there. We were represented. We were, we had a table, we had literature, we had people sitting at the table. We were there talking about what we did. And we always reached out to the influential people in the community as well. So it was emails, it was calls, it was a face-to-face to talk about what we're doing, that we're a part of this community, and what we're doing is important, and we're trying to help. So I'm not really sure what we can do now, since those things are kind of taken away. I mean, there's still some opportunities to kind of reach out face to face in those ways, but a lot of those events have kind of disappeared. But there's still ways to reach out. I mean, one of the things that we had done is we always had literature at places where they would accept it. So, I mean, it was the schools, it was the universities. If there was a bulletin board anywhere, we had a flyer up there that let people know what was going on, and just to kind of always have it on people's minds wherever they were in the community. So it was the churches, we talked to the church leaders. I mean, we had flyers up at laundromats, at grocery stores, at, wherever we could put our material up, just as a way to kind of plant a seed in people's minds about what we were doing. And I think that CCL could probably do the same thing. I'm not sure how much of that is happening, just to plant that seed in people's mind, to let them know that we're here, that, there's different places where we can go. I mean, even tribal offices and headquarters, there's the Indian clinics around Oklahoma City and throughout Oklahoma, where we could just plant that seed with the people who work there and with the people who go there. So yeah, I mean, I think that just old school outreach with paper, with these images, with and I guess when we talk about images, one of the good things is that CCL already does is in all their images of the people doing this work, it's very diverse. It's already very diverse. If you go to the website, it's not just monolithic one group of people, it's all kinds of people. And so with that kind of literature out there in those diverse communities, I think that kind of strikes a chord with the people there. And that's something that might, like I say, plant that seed for people and kind of bring more people into the fold and let them know that we're on their side with really, a struggle that's been going on in indigenous communities since the beginning. A lot of these conflicts that happen in the United States were often based on land use and sustainability. I mean, there was other things going on too. So it's not like these folks haven't been working. So they have been, but it's nice to let them know that they're not alone, and that there's other groups that are really there right alongside them. And so I think that, there are things we can do, and sometimes it's just the basic things that can plant that seed.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So a couple more questions to go. And like I said, remember, if you have any questions to ask our speakers, be sure to drop that in the chat. All right. So how do you think living in the tornadoes region influences diversity in the environmental movement? And what are some things you would recommend we do to change that?
Yeah. So look, I'm a straight white male with almost all the privileges in the world. I am the face of hegemony. I am the face of the power structure. I'm the face of everything this panel seeks to mitigate. But at the same time, the reality is that the demographics of our region are primarily like me. So how do we deal with that reality? I have a three-part structure that I tend to use for most white hetero men who deny climate change or see this justice as just another liberal issue that's being peddled, right? They're almost in complete denial of their positionality in this world and what society has given them that they haven't exactly worked for necessarily. Kind of get rid of the bootstraps argument. So the first, they're all three A's. So they're three A's. The first is to acknowledge, right? If you can acknowledge that across demographics, right? Maybe this isn't your experience because you grew up poor with some disadvantage. Across our population, we've tended to have the most political leaders, the largest share of wealth. We've had the most representation in businesses and in the large power structures. Now, there's certainly statistics to challenge that narrative, but overall, it is just the way it is. So if we can acknowledge the way it is, then we can move forward. The second A is to accept, right? You can acknowledge something, but you're like, I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to believe it. So internalizing it is good. And this just comes with repetition and talking to close friends and families, as Dr. Hayhoe mentioned. It's just about talking to those close to you because you're going to listen to them. You're not going to listen to some talking head on Zoom necessarily that you don't know. The third, and this is where we get to the most active, is to advocate, right? So it's interesting that I'm on this panel because I'm talking about two things. First, conservatives as a minority in the climate change movement as we've experienced through CCL, but also as an advocate for these other positions. I think that always has to come from my perspective, elevating the platform for those people. For me, it doesn't mean shutting up. If anything, it means speaking out, because my parents always told me that silence is compliance. So when given the platform as I do now, I will speak out. Understanding the dichotomies of privileged, non-privileged, marginalized, non-marginalized, as always being constructed by my category is something that we both need to advocate against in practice, and also just to acknowledge. So what does this look like in practice? What can we actually do in the Tornadoes region with a bunch of people who look like me? Well, I think that we have to give I don't know how else to say this, to give the gay conservatives, to give the non-white conservatives that platform, right? But to put the conservative label on it to show that this party doesn't just have to be a bunch of old white men, which it is demographically, like that's a huge block of our nation. And to also show that, look, conservatives don't have to be the QAnon people. They don't have to be the diehard MAGA devotees. They don't have to be the fascistic faction that doesn't denigrate the storming of the Capitol. There can be a recapturing of what it means to be conservative by giving these platforms to those who don't fit the mold we're all used to seeing. And that first starts by acknowledging, then accepting, then advocating for those non-dominant voices. And with that, I will shut up.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Okay, so to all of our panelists, if you can give any piece of advice to our audience, what would it be?
I think for me, I'm going to start with the advice that I always tell everybody, no matter what situation I'm in. I seem to be a good form of blanket advice. Do your research. If you're not sure about something, do your research. Look at your sources, research everything. If you've got questions, seek knowledge, seek answers. People can't take knowledge away from you. You just got to make sure that the knowledge is correct and that it's not fake. Whenever I talk with people about what CCL does, or more broadly about climate change, there are a lot of different lights that you can portray it in depending on who your audience is. The advice that I give you going forward is that when you talk about climate change or the environment with your friends, regardless of whether they're black, white, gay, straight, conservative, liberal, doesn't matter. at the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to be a good person. I think that to an extent, we're all morally good. I think that we all want to do the right thing. I think that the diversity of this group showcases that people all want to do the right thing. People are morally good. As you go forward, as you go out into the world after today, after hearing from everybody's voices, just remind people that as good people, it's our responsibility to take care of what we've been given. And that means it's our responsibility to take care of the earth. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for your children or do it for your friends' children. Do it for your grandchildren, do it for your friends' grandchildren, do it for your pets. No matter what that looks like, whether that's planting a garden, whether that's lobbying with your senator, whether that's recycling, whether that's trying to get a bill passed. Little steps lead to bigger ones. And that goes across party lines, that goes across demographics. So as you go forward, don't feel like you have to have a bill passed in order to be a successful environmentalist. It can just be something as simple as going outside and picking up trash or using more paper instead of plastic. So take heart, just try to do your best, and you'll ultimately end up making a bigger difference than you did the day before.
Thank you. Okay, looks like we have one question in the chat. How common of a topic is climate change when you're talking with your peers? This is for anybody.
Yeah, for me, it really depends. Being a political nerd, whenever I talk politics with a lot of my friends, we usually shift the topic to policies and things like that. And that, for me, because I'm kind of open-ended whenever I talk politics with friends, that kind of runs the gamut. I'll hit 100 points in a 2-hour conversation. So it really just kind of depends on the nature of the conversation. Like I said, if it is sort of more a political discussion with a friend, yeah, I'll always bring up climate as one of my top 3 concerns. But even in like daily conversation, somebody might be like, okay, well, what are you going to do this weekend? Like, what are your plans? Like, well, I'm going to sit down and either write something for CCL, to write a letter to the editor regarding climate change. And then that kind of opens the door for conversation. And it's not hard to work in. It can just be something as casual as that. It really depends, though. The direction that I go with the conversation, I kind of let be determined by whoever I'm talking to, because I never know necessarily what my audience's viewpoint is going to be on that, whether I'm going to get like easily shut down or whether it's going to be like, oh, that's cool, how can I get involved as well? So just kind of taking it from like an open perspective has oftentimes led to me recruiting more people into our movement.
All right, so reminder, we have about 15 more minutes left. If anybody has any more questions, you can put them in the chat now, or if you would prefer to speak them, you can go ahead and just unmute yourself and we can take questions the remainder of our time. And once again, if any of our panelists would like to comment on anything they would recommend or give advice to all of our audience members, you can feel free to chime back in and share that. Jacob, looks like Tony's calling you out.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know. Oh, there's the question. Oh, right. So the Kansas state coordinator is Tony Schmidt, and he was one of the first ones to get me on this idea of moral foundations theory, started by Jonathan Haidt, what I mentioned earlier. And he actually has a great write-up if you want to message him. He took wonderful notes about that. You know, the way I approach conservatives with this information is it makes sense to me, just based on my experiences, that conservatives might want to be a little more enclosed and defer more to authority, to see more sanctity, right? There's a sanctity degradation, moral foundation, more sanctity in the American idea. And when you start getting the left talking about ending all capitalism or hating the country, you're never going to reach a conservative audience, because the American flag psychologically and neurologically means something different for a conservative than it does a liberal. It's a more sacred symbol. That moral foundation was found to be far more among conservatives than it was liberals. The second thing I would say is that the moderate conservative is actually the best, not the best, the most common evolutionary tendency. That is, they're the most even on all 5 moral foundations. And you can just Google this if you want. Meaning that liberals now have care harm way above, right? They want to care for everyone. You hear all this sorts of iterations like justice and all that. And they have that one way up. But as we evolve from the African savanna, as Haidt talks about, it was best to be even in all 5 dimensions. And that's what social conservatives have today. So it's not bad. If anything, it makes the most sense. So to start from a place, and this is a deep conversation, right? You probably don't want to just start in on this with a random stranger. But if you begin from a place of, look, we share these morals and let's go from here, then I think you're going to have a better time of avoiding the whole, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, we're going to fight like cats and dogs, the same old story. And I have more to say on this academically, but I think practically and pragmatically, coming at it from the shared morals is the best way to have dialogue and not debate.
Thank you, Jacob. It looks like we have one hand raised by Steve. Before you go ahead and ask your question, I will comment. There's 2 questions in here about engaging youth. And there is a panel after this, a workshop about engaging youth. So we're going to save those questions till the end, just in case we run out of time. But Steve, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. This is my first time here, so this is really pretty cool. I had a couple comments. First of all, I wrote notes here. First of all, to Joe. My great grandmother was a Cherokee Indian adopted off the Trail of Tears. So I can appreciate the fact that you have Native American blood, and so do I. Katie, yeah, I agree with what you said about the internet access, because sometimes I'm sort of the devil's advocate in these things, because I'm thinking that before you get your message out, I think to myself, how can I reach people that don't have internet access? Because none of them would be here today if they didn't have internet access. In fact, our governor has made it a priority. I don't know about the other states, but our priority to put more money into getting Wi-Fi. One quick story, and I try to take this be as quick as I can. Western Kansas, and maybe Jacob has heard this. I know Jacob has heard me because I bugged him already. There in Wichita, so he probably knows how I can be a buggy. But in any case, there was an instance in Western Kansas in the last couple of years where people that didn't have internet access would gather around the bank. 9 o'clock in the morning, they have the Wi-Fi, gather around there, and then at 5 o'clock the bank closed, the parking lot emptied, because that was the end of their internet access right there. And I would think that type of situation exists more than we realize, even here in Eastern Kansas. Another thing too, as Jacob mentioned, I totally disagree with him by saying that many Kansans are common sense, because if they were, they would not have elected Roger Marshall, senator, for here. And I don't think that Roger Marshall would even listen to me if I did talk to him, because I believe that the Republican Party is imploding, and until they get rid of Donald Trump from the hip, that's right. And I think really that if we could look at ourselves more like the British, where you have a conservative party, and I don't care what they call the Republican Party, and I'll try to make this fast because I'm not sure other people have lots of things more important to say than I. But I'm very much interested in reaching out to the politicians. But I'll have to admit that I've written to Jerry Moran, and he'll say, I'll hear an answer back to you, and I'll never hear from him. So I get a little discouraged when, in fact, in Pat Roberts was very good. He gave me an answer, but it was a canned answer that had nothing to do with what my question was. So again, to me, the most important thing is when I approach this, I'm trying to think, does this person have internet access? Because I know people that are still using flip phones. So I agree with everything you're saying. You're preaching to the choir. And as you can see, I'm National Weather Service retired from that. So I'm, you don't have to convince me about climate change, but and I'm willing to go out and talk to people. But anyway, that's where I come from. And I love this. This is fantastic. Looks like we have 57 people on the last I see, but that's enough for me. And but I appreciate the time, and everybody here from your perspective is fantastic. So that's enough.
Thank you,
Thank you
Steve.
so much for sharing. Did you have something else to say, Katie?
Oh, I was just going to say thank you, Steve, because I think that's exactly it. And Joe had kind of touched on some paper solutions to internet access inequality, but it's also hard to post paper in places when people are in a lockdown, because then at that point they're not getting out to see the paper. So I think that it's definitely something to think about, how we reach out to these communities that are really, really impacted, that don't have as much access to this knowledge as we do.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like we have another question. What are the group's thoughts on the most effective way to move our policy forward in the next 18 months?
I think that for me personally, thank you, Keaton, for the question. Whenever we lobby, especially with our conservative leaders, it's all about the money for them. It's because they've expressed a lot of concern so far on the amount of money that has been spent on stimulating the economy during a pandemic. It really is all about the numbers. It's all about the money. So whenever I've started pitching things to a conservative audience, to our conservative leaders, I always talk about the financial benefits. I always talk about either how much money this approach will save or how much money this approach will make. And that really seems to be a crucial argument for them. I'm starting to see a lot of the signs of the country's kind of starting to open up again. People want to send kids back to school. People want to increase the capacities allowed within restaurants, stores, things like that. So I think we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, especially with vaccines coming out. So mentally for me, I've started to shift towards, okay, what kind of policy arguments do we need to have moving forward within the next 18 months, as I assume the pandemic comes to an end? For me, it's really going to be a lot of arguing about the financial benefits and repercussions of focusing on climate change and climate change initiatives.
Awesome. Okay, so it looks like from Mary, she says, please speak about Michael Mann, who has written about recently discovered evidence that corporations have moved from denial to implying that individuals need to reduce their carbon footprint, shifting blame away from corporations.
Well, I would say that's a common tactic. That's not new. I think what is new, that's more pernicious perhaps, is companies like ExxonMobil that take on this green stamp with vague understanding of how they're going to reach the milestones of like net zero or carbon neutral, right? And I'm not arguing with their top scientists because I'm not one, but I'm saying they're not making it clear from the outset what they mean by carbon neutral or zero emissions. To me, it sounds like greenwashing, right? It sounds like you're claiming one thing just to get in on the fad, kind of like you've seen in organic agriculture, but then not follow through on the practices. So again, you have to be careful of labels. The second concept is astroturfing, and this is bad. It's when large companies or individuals like the Coke company, as written in Cokeland, fund grassroots efforts and make it look like the people are interested in this, but in fact it's not the big corporations. To me, the answer to this is overturning Citizens United in 2010, just with funding and campaign finance laws. Until you do that, you're just going to have too many corporations, their rhetoric, their messaging, about individuals need to do more without them taking on responsibility. You're just going to see more and more of that until the law says that, no, they're corporations, they're not just individuals themselves.
All right, we're going to try and squeeze one more question in really quick. This one's going to be for Allison. What do you think are the most effective things we could be doing to get young people involved in addressing climate change, specifically supporting carbon fee and dividend?
Well, for youth outreach, it's a pretty tough thing, especially, well, I'm in university, so I can really only speak for college students and a bit about high school students. One thing is using social media. I've talked about this a lot. Making sure that we use social media in a way that attracts the youth population, and also having opportunities. I don't think that I wouldn't personally just go out and do a whole set of work for someone if I wasn't gaining something, honestly. I think if we have opportunities for the youth, if we have more either internships, externships, those types of opportunities is extremely helpful. And I do know that CCL has programs with certain universities that can help attract the youth population, but also reaching out towards other organizations. I do know that Sierra Club in New Jersey is trying to form a relationship with CCL and having a whole new youth area. But also in a lot of webinars, I see that there's always a section for the youth and then the regular section. There's no reason why we have to separate the two, honestly. The youth are just as capable as talking about these policies, just as capable as talking about how to lobby for someone when you need them in your calls. So bridging that divide is really helpful, and that's what they want. They want that experience before, and that's going to tell them, oh yeah, I really do want to have this as a career and other stuff. So sparking that interest is not going to only help you guys, but also help the youth population.
Thank you. That was perfect. Yeah. So one of our next sessions is going to be engaging youth, and we are going to talk a lot about internships and how to engage youth, high school and college level. So if you're interested in that and want more questions answered, make sure to tune into that one. But that's about all of our time. So thank you so much to all of our wonderful panelists. And just to everybody, remember, alone we can do very little, but together we can do so much. So just remember to keep working together, embrace all different people from all walks of life, and we'll be able to accomplish so much. And